When I finished my mandatory military service in 2011, Syria looked stable. On paper, it looked almost good. No foreign debt, cheap electricity and gas. Education was almost free. Healthcare was almost free. Cancer treatment cost only 10% of the actual price. People worked hard. Internet existed. Life was livable. But there was a price for this stability. A heavy price. The price was freedom. The security grip was suffocating. There was only one ideology allowed. One way of thinking. One path. Resistance against the West. Socialism. Permanent war preparation. And the hypocrisy was sickening. Government officials would preach about sacrifice and resistance. They would give speeches about fighting imperialism and defending our values. But their children studied in the finest universities in Europe and America. Their wives wore the most expensive foreign brands. Their bank accounts were filled with stolen wealth. It was theater. Expensive, murderous theater. When the Arab Spring began in 2011, it started peacefully. People wanted reform. They wanted freedom. They wanted justice. I supported this. I believed in this. Despite everything I had suffered, I still believed that change was possible. But something went wrong. By the second month of the uprising, I noticed a shift. The peaceful protests were being hijacked. New slogans appeared. Calls for an Islamic caliphate. Calls for Sharia law. Calls for a new theocracy. The moderate voices were being silenced. And extremist voices were getting louder. At the same time, the government responded with brutality. They arrested activists. They tortured them. They disappeared people. It became clear very quickly that both sides were playing a game. A game with our lives as the stakes. The government had its allies. Iran, Russia, Hezbollah. They sent money, weapons, and soldiers. The opposition had its allies too. Foreign powers sent money, weapons, and fighters. Foreign fighters. Mostly jihadists from other countries. Brainwashed by radical Islam. Funded by external entities. Trained by various intelligence agencies. They came to fight a holy war. To establish an Islamic state. To impose their version of religion on everyone. And caught in the middle were ordinary Syrians. People like me. People who didn't want this war. People who just wanted to live. I made a choice. I chose to be gray. I was not with the government. I opposed their brutality, their corruption, and their dictatorship. But I was also not with the opposition because it had become infected with radical Islam. They were just as brutal, just as murderous, just as evil. I chose to speak out. I wrote a post on Facebook. A simple post. I called for reform. I called for people to see the truth. I acknowledged that our country was broken and needed to change. It was 2014. The war was at its peak. Militias everywhere. Gangs. Extremist organizations. I was arrested. They came in the middle of the night. Took me from my home. Threw me in a black hood. Drove me to a detention center. I spent 2.5 months in that place. I will not describe the torture in detail. Some things are too dark to put into words. But I will tell you this. I met death there. I became friends with death. Death was my cellmate, always waiting to take me. Some days I wished death would come, because it seemed like mercy compared to what was happening. When I was released, it was because my family paid money to someone. Money they didn't have. Money they had to borrow. I walked out of that detention center and I understood something that I had been too young to understand before. Both sides were wrong. The government was wrong. It was brutal, corrupt, and tyrannical. But the opposition was also wrong. It was infected with the same extremism that had destroyed so many countries. The same jihadist ideology. The same hatred for anyone who didn't agree with them. Both were demons. And both were leading my country to hell. I realized that staying in Syria meant choosing one demon or the other. And I refused. So I ran. In 2015, I gathered everything I had left. What little remained after years of war, torture, and loss. I crossed the border into Lebanon. When my feet touched Lebanese soil, I took a breath. A real breath. The first real breath I had taken in years. I felt like I was leaving hell itself. But Lebanon was not a home. It was a stopover, a temporary place while I figured out where to go. And it was there that I learned something about my own people that broke my heart. Most of the problems I faced in Lebanon came from other Syrians. Theft, scams, betrayal. It was almost always other Syrians. The Lebanese people were kind to me. They helped me. They gave me work. But many Syrians were taking advantage of the Lebanese hospitality. They were committing crimes. They were disrespecting the laws. And I understood why the Lebanese people were beginning to grow wary of us. It wasn't racism. It was a survival instinct. If millions of people from another country came to yours and a significant percentage of them committed crimes and disrespected your laws, you would be cautious too. You would be angry too. The problem was ignorance. Deep, systemic ignorance. This ignorance had been created by war, by radical Islam, by years of propaganda and brainwashing. A large portion of the Syrian people had become criminals, not by nature but by the environment they were trapped in. I am not generalizing about all Syrians. There were still good people, people who held onto humanity like a life raft in an ocean of blood. But the majority had been poisoned by extremism and desperation. I met a Christian Lebanese family. They became my family. They helped me. They employed me. They taught me what real charity meant. I studied Christianity with them, not to convert, but to understand. To learn about love, mercy, and forgiveness. I learned that these values exist in Christianity, just as they should exist in Islam. But radical Islam had murdered these values. It had killed compassion and replaced it with hatred. 7 years I spent in Lebanon. 7 years of hard work, of learning, of healing. Then I left. I came to a cold country, a country that respects itself, a country that respects law and order, a country where people are not killing each other over religion. But my journey taught me something crucial. I had been taught in Syria that the Gulf Arabs were ignorant Bedouins with no culture. But when I met people from the Gulf, I discovered they were more cultured than me. Their countries were developed, safe, and modern. I had been taught that Israelis were our eternal enemies, that they were subhuman, that we had to hate them. But when I met Israelis, I discovered that they were some of the most humane people I had ever met. They were open to peace. They were kind. They were just trying to live their lives. Now some of you will attack me for what I am about to say. You will tell me about Gaza. You will tell me about Palestinian suffering. And I will answer you honestly. I have suffered at the hands of Islamic extremism. I have been tortured. I have seen people I love murdered. I have lost everything. I understand what terror means. I understand what it means to live under constant fear. When you have a terrorist organization like Hamas living next to you, ruling your territory, hiding weapons in schools and hospitals, using children as human shields, yes, a military response is necessary. Is it perfect? No. War is never perfect. Innocent people suffer. This is the tragedy of war. But when your enemy's stated goal is your genocide, when they teach children to hate you, when they celebrate the murder of your civilians, what do? You fight back. I support Israel not because it is perfect. It is not. No country is perfect. I support Israel because it is the only country in the Middle East that respects human rights, that has free elections, that has free speech, that has LGBTQ rights, that has female soldiers and female judges and female leaders. Compare this to many other countries in the region. They are authoritarian. They oppress their people. They deny basic human rights. But Israel is different. And yes, there is racism in Israel. Yes, there are injustices. But these things are debated openly. They are challenged. There are human rights organizations. There are protests. In the rest of the Middle East, if you protest, you disappear. My country freed itself from Bashar al-Assad. I should be happy about this. For years I dreamed of his fall. But my country did not become free. It became something worse. It was occupied by Islamic extremists. The same people who had tortured me in detention centers. The same people who had tried to kill me. The same people who had destroyed everything. Now they rule. Now they make the laws. Now they decide who lives and who dies. From one dictatorship to another. From one form of oppression to another. My country is dead. Its body is being divided among different factions. Turks in the north. Russians everywhere. Americans in the east. Iranians in the center. Syria is gone. But I am not dead. I survived torture. I survived war. I survived exile. And now I am here to tell you something that people are afraid to say. Islam, as it is practiced by the majority of Muslims today, is a problem. Not because Islam itself is inherently evil, but because it has been corrupted, used as a tool of control, and weaponized by extremists. The teachings of Jesus were twisted by the Inquisition, and millions died. The teachings of Islam are being twisted by jihadists, and millions are dying. The solution is not to destroy Islam. The solution is for Muslims to reform Islam, to reclaim it from the extremists, to modernize it, to make it compatible with human rights and democracy. But this is not happening. In most Muslim countries, the opposite is happening. Islam is becoming more extreme, more rigid, more violent. I chose humanity over religion. I chose reason over faith. I chose compassion over ideology. And this choice saved my life. In the next episode, I will tell you how I rebuilt my body. How I went from a weak, broken man to someone strong and healthy. I will tell you about the gym, about discipline, about transformation. Because physical transformation mirrors spiritual transformation. When you change your body, you change your mind. You change your entire being. If my story has spoken to you, if it has challenged you, if it has made you think, then subscribe. Join this community. Be part of this family. And please, I welcome your criticism. I welcome your questions. I welcome your debate, because I am not afraid to be wrong. I am not afraid to learn. I am not afraid to grow. But I am done being afraid of the truth. Thank you for listening.